All
Yes.
right, all right.
Okay. Well, good night, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation to participate today in the California Native Plant Society Yerba Buena chapter. I have participated in other events with the California Native Plant Society, and so it's great to keep working with you guys. So, Dr. Johanna Del Castillo. I'm an assistant professor at the University of California in Davis. I'm an also extension specialist, so I work directly with greenhouse and nursery producers here in California. My background, I have as an undergrad, my background was science and microbiology, but then I did my graduate students in plant pathology. So today I will be talking into how to keep pathogens out of the nursery, and I will be starting and to talk about the importance of managing plant pathogens, specifically oomycete pathogens. And just to clarify, can you guys see the presenter version of the my presentation, right?
Yes, we see
Yes.
the full slide
Excellent.
of
Great.
the outline.
Okay, so then after I'll go over the importance of oomycete pathogens, I will go over a system approach for managing disease and pathogens in the nursery, and then how can we incorporate this system approach in California native nurseries. That's the word I'll be talking about the accreditation to improve restoration, which is the program we have been running in the past few years here in California. And I will be giving some details into how to join the AIR program for the nurseries that are interested. And I just heard the great news that your chapter is ready to start building a nursery. So I hope this talk is helpful for you guys. And so I cannot hear you, but this is a question that you can ask yourself. Have you guys ever heard the word Phytophthora? And what is it and why do we care about it? So Phytophthora, it's a plant pathogen. If we have the description, it's a word in Greek, and if we break down the meaning, means plant destroyer. And so this is before it was recognized as a fungus, but it's not an actual fungus, is more closely related to brown algae. And so we call them also like water molds. And one reason that we call them water molds is because they have the ability to swim and spread through water. So that's a little bit of the biology of this pathogen. And then I'll be talking into the quality issue and like why do we care about Phytophthora in the nursery system. So we may have plants that look asymptomatic by basically looking pretty healthy with green leaves, flowering, probably like a good size. But once we take this plant out of the nursery, it can die after it's transplanted or after it's sold at a retail nursery. So there can be certain factors such as plant stress after plants leave a nursery. When plants are well maintained in a nursery, they are under all the great conditions. They have enough water, they have enough nutrients, they have all the resources not to be stressed. But once they leave a nursery and say they go to a restoration site, probably they don't get much water. The nutrient availability may be a limiting factor. And then in case those plants may be infected with a pathogen, that's when they start seeing symptoms. And so that is when we may think there may be something going on with the plants that were just bought from the nursery or the plants that were transplanted to the nursery setting. Another issue with Phytophthora, it can be in continuation in quality, is that also plants that are asymptomatic, as I mentioned, like they look healthy, can harbor quarantine pathogens. One example of this is Phytophthora ramorum. Probably you guys may be familiar with the Sorenok death that happened in the early 2000s, where it was in all the Pacific Northwest, a big disturbance and destroyed of oaks and other species caused by one pathogen called Phytophthora ramorum. Currently, this pathogen is still regulatory, so it means like once it's detected at the nursery, the nursery has go into some quarantine and some regulatory process. And so, of course, plants cannot be sold, and it has to be remediated. And if we are at the nursery, and of course, if the nursery is a business, well, dead plants will be a loss because these plants could not be sold, or of course, could not be transplanted in restoration purposes. One important thing to note about these Phytophthora pathogens is that once a plant is infected, there is no cure. So once the pathogen is present there, there's not a way to really eliminate the pathogen. That's why when managing these pathogens, the main approach that we want to take is preventing so it's not present in our nursery. And of course, if we have infected plants, these infected plants can be a source of inoculum, where, as I mentioned, different zoospores, which are the spreading structures of this pathogen, can move into healthier plant tissues. And I think most importantly and relevant for this group and for all the work we're doing here in California is that if Phytophthora is present in the nurseries, it can spread the pathogen into native ecosystems. So we have seen in California that in the last decade, there are some failed restoration projects. And what I mean by fail is that after the project is restored, there has been like high plant mortality and plant decay around the restored areas. And so around 2014 and 15 in the Bay Area, there were some restoration projects that were affected by this. And so this drive the efforts of the CDFA, which is the California Department of Food and Agriculture, the Forest Service, and other researchers to look into what was happening with these failed projects. And what they found was that they found several Phytophthora species present in the affected areas. And so they went and traced at the different nurseries that provided the plants for these restoration projects, and they found over 50 different Phytophthora species and also similar species than they were found at the failed restoration projects. So this was, of course, a wake-up call and was very concerning for the restoration community here in California. And so as a response to that, there was created the Phytophthora in native habitats working group, also known as CalPhytos. And this group was created by restoration nursery owners, by scientists in the CDFA, in the Forest Service, at universities. And so basically, the main idea of this group is like, how can we prevent the spread of these oomycete pathogens in native ecosystems? So from these joint efforts, there was created this accreditation program to produce plant nurseries free of Phytophthora pathogens. This started in 2017. I joined this program in 2020. And so the accreditation to improve restoration is based in how to implement best management practices to produce native plants free of Phytophthora. These best management practices are based on implementing a systematic approach for disease prevention. So what do we mean by a systems approach for disease management? So a system approach is based in like how different components of a whole can influence each other. So if we think at the nursery, would be like how the soil, the pots, the propagules, the water used for irrigation influence each other. In our case, for producing healthy nursery stock, ideally free of pathogens. And so by thinking in all the different steps that are needed to produce plants in a nursery and all the different processes, the idea is to come up with overlapping and cumulative preventative measures that can reduce or exclude the presence of pathogens in the nursery. By implementing system approach, it provides growers and nursery practitioners new processes to prevent pests and diseases. And this system approach was originally developed in Oregon, which is a big nursery producer state, and by some researchers working with the USDA ARS and at the Oregon State University. So a system approach that was developed was based on a hazard analysis of critical control points that we know as HACCP. You may have heard of this, and it has been widely used in the food industry. So, for instance, like for the production of cheeses or for the production of sausages, there are certain steps in the food production that they need to be pretty, like well sanitized and basically pathogen free to guarantee there are not foodborne pathogens present in there. So this HACCP program was adopted to nursery production, and basically a HACCP program is a risk management program, and the main principle of this the risk management program is to identify the hazards. So basically, like what are our harms? In our case, plant pathogens, and also identify critical control points, which are points in the production process, in our case of plants, that may pose a greater risk for disease to occur or pathogen to infect. And so the idea is that once we have identified these critical control points of infection, we can evaluate them and correct them to eliminate or reduce the risk of a pathogen if it's present there. I don't know if I can ask questions while I'm presenting, but if you have any questions, have them in mind, and I can answer them at the end of the presentation. So let's go into what can be potential hazards in the nursery. So we have new plants or propagules that come to the nursery. An important practice, and that what we recommend for the native nurseries, is ideally the seeds or the propagation sources should be collected by the nursery, so you can guarantee that all the best management practices were taken in place at the moment of the collection. A nursery hazard also can be contaminated ground. In the ground, there are millions of microorganisms, and many of these microorganisms can be bacteria, fungal, or oomycetes that are pathogens. So we assume that the ground is always contaminated. Also looking into what is the source of irrigation water. In many cases, fresh water bodies or like stream water or surface water can harbor pathogens if it hasn't been treated. And also where the plants are grown. So think of the trays, the pots, the containers, as in many cases nurseries reuse them, which is a good practice because it's recycled, but also are there any sanitation practices taken into account when used containers are implemented? And also the potting media or the substrate media can be contaminated and can contain pathogens. And so now what I will be going on in this part of the presentation is going into these different hazards, and then how can we have adequate management practices to prevent them from happening. So going on with the first hazard, the new plant material. So the idea is to collect propagules from healthy plants, clean seeds and cuttings. Ideally, we recommend that when collections take place, that this is done during the dry season. The reason for that is because if there are Phytophthora propagules in the ground and it's raining, by water splash, different propagules can contaminate the different, like seeds or cuttings that are used for propagation. In our website that I'll have the QR code in a minute, we also have all the different guidelines and the different tiers when propagules are being collected. Also, when collecting outside, we recommend taking plant spar from healthy trees. If you see that the tree or the plant seems symptomatic, we recommend to avoid collecting for trees that may have some disease symptoms. In case that you need to buy some plants, we recommend buying plants from nurseries that have already been certified. So those nurseries are following best management practices. And it's pretty important that if you bring plant material that is not fully grown at your nursery, to scout the plant material that is coming. And it's pretty important to place in quarantine areas new plant material, because in case that these are infected, you are preventing that whatever infection that was brought with those plants is not dispersed to the plants that you're growing in-house in your nursery. Besides having the plants in quarantine area, what we recommend is testing new plant material to guarantee that they're free of the pathogens. And again, it's very important to not mix incoming plant material with existing plant material that you have at the nursery. Following up with the second hazard, contaminated ground. So something that we should completely avoid is the direct contact between the soil and containers. Again, as I mentioned, the soil can harbor millions of microbes, and many of these microbes can be pathogenic to plants. So the best management practices that we have in their program is that the plants should be on raised benches, and then a gravel or rock barrier should be added between them. In terms of the distance from the ground from these benches, it should be between 2.5 feet, 2.5 to 3 feet. And the reason for that height is also to prevent a water splash. And so at a 3 feet distance, you can guarantee that the plants won't be infected with potential water splash. Continuing with the contaminated ground, it could be a splash dispersals of pathogens, as I just mentioned it. And so what is pretty important is water management. What we recommend is preventing standing water, avoid overwatering, improve drainage. If the nursery is gonna be built, make sure there is a slope so the water is not accumulated in certain areas, because as I mentioned, these Phytophthora pathogens get favored by the presence of water. So having best irrigation practices and preventing areas from being pretty moist or pretty flooded is a pretty good practice to keep these pathogens at bay. Also, another hazard from the contaminated ground is the movement of contaminated soil, tools, equipment, or staff. So the best management practices for that is very important to clean and sanitize any equipment that is used during production. And so the first step by cleaning, what we mean by cleaning is removing any, soil or organic matter or plant debris. And by sanitizers, we mean using a disinfectant to eliminate any potential propagules that the different tools we're working with may harbor. What we recommend in the air program is to use a bleach as the sanitizer, and also ethanol or isopropanol alcohol that are very effective to eliminate microbial propagules right away when they are applied, right when they become in contact with surfaces. Also, something that is very important to do is basically keep clean practices in the nursery. So the soil can be infected by infested foliage or older plant material. And so what we recommend is prevent and remove any leafy debris from accumulated in the soil, remove any organic matter, remove all plant material, as these plant materials can harbor inoculum of pathogens. And again, you want to prevent any conditions that may favor the pathogens to thrive. So moving on with the third hazard is contaminated irrigation water. So I haven't mentioned before, but the CCP stands for the critical control point. So the critical control point here would be use of contaminated water as irrigation source. As I mentioned, surface water, such as water from ponds, rivers, or recycled water can contain pathogens, and the best management practices to be sure that you don't have pathogens is use well water or use city water that water is disinfested, and in well water there is low chance that pathogens are present. In case that is not possible and you have to use river or recycled water, definitely this water should be tested for Phytophthora presence. This is an example of a rhododendron leaf that we use as bait, and those like brown dots that you see there are lesions of Phytophthora. And so there are, if in case that surface water is used, it's recommended to test the water for Phytophthora, and of course implement a disinfestation treatment to make sure the water is free of these pathogens. As I mentioned earlier, as these pathogens really like the water because they have spores that allow them to swim, preventing splash dispersal or contamination of waterways is pretty important to prevent the spread of this pathogen. And the best management practices is to prevent standing water, having well drainage, avoid over irrigation. As I mentioned again, raising the containers off the ground so they're not in direct touch with the soil or the water. Some recommendations for irrigation management practices is schedule water in the morning so plants have all day to dry out. And also pretty important to collect the runoff water or having like the nursery in a slope so the water is canalized in a certain way that is not flooding while the plants are around. Moving on with the for a hazard are use containers. So all nurseries that we work with reuse their trays and containers. But so one thing with that is that as they were used from previous crops, there's a chance that those containers may harbor pathogens. And so the best management practice is, well, use new containers that you don't have to recycle or disinfest the used containers. And the most effective treatment to kill Phytophthora propagules and any pathogens is by heat treatment. And so we need at least 30 minutes of continuous exposure to moist heat. And the temperature, what we propose is 150 Fahrenheit, between 150 and 160 Fahrenheit, to get rid of any fungi, bacteria, or Pythium or Phytophthora pathogens that may be pathogenic to your crop. And so, so as in the air program, what we recommend is applying aerated steam. So some nurseries have their own steam sterilization system. And the most important thing of this is that they should reach 140 to 150 Fahrenheit for at least 30 continuous minutes to achieve the sterilization of the pots as well as the soil. And then moving on with the final hazard is the contaminated potting media. So as I mentioned, the soilless media or the substrate media can harbor pathogens. And so the best practice to make sure the soilless media that you're using don't contain any pathogens is to steam sterilize the media. And what is recommended is like once the media is steam sterilized, as well as the pots, they should be stored in a covered area free of contamination, away of infested water, soil, or plants. So say like you have a room or a container that can be designated for storage of sterilized material. And also really important, if you are mixing the substrate, make sure you use clean equipment, shovels, gloves when planting. So the benefits of implementing a system approach is that it provides a framework to identify critical control points in nursery production and reduce the risk of pathogen presence. And so the idea is that how can we put together all these different, like irrigation, soil inputs, have the plants above the ground, making sure the propagules are clean, improving irrigation practices to reduce or eliminate the likelihood that, in this case, Phytophthora pathogens are present. And with that, those are the baselines of the accreditation program to improve restoration. As I mentioned, this program started in 2017 as a pilot program. Since I became a professor at UC Davis in 2023, this program is housed at UC Davis in the Department of Plant Pathology. We have a website that you can access in this link, and also in the QR code. You can go into our website where we have information about the program, multiple resources for nurseries, how to join the program, and a list of the nurseries that are currently participating on it. So this program was started by Susan Frankel from the U.S. Forest Service, that probably you may know her, by Ted Zwicky, and by Diana Benner. And Dean Watson, which is in the top picture next to me, is a staff research associate working with me at UC Davis. He's my right hand at going and visiting the nurseries, and me since I joined the program in 2020, and since 2023, I start to lead this program. So currently we have 20 nurseries participating in the program. 10 of those are fully accredited, and the remaining ones are in progress of accreditation. We currently have 9 new nurseries that are at early stages of joining the AIR program. And a big highlight from this program is that we have not identified Phytophthora in the accredited nurseries in the last 4 years. So we are aware it's a strict program, but it's actually very effective and guaranteeing the exclusion of Phytophthora pathogens, preventing these havocs in native ecosystems. So in our AIR website, we have the list of participating nurseries. In Northern California, we have 13 nurseries that you can see in the list that we have there. You can see that they are from different counties in Northern California, and you can see the accreditation status from the ones that are already accredited and the ones that are in progress of accreditation. In Southern California, we also have 7 participating nurseries, with 3 fully accredited and 4 in progress of accreditation. So talking about like how to join this program and some information, more information about it. So we are a voluntary audit-based program, and the idea is that we want to increase the confidence in the cleanliness of restoration and native plant nursery stock here in California. Nurseries enroll the program by completing a nursery evaluation form. And this nursery evaluation form is very detailed. We understand can be a bit scary to complete, but basically in this form, the nursery will be detailing all the best management practices in place. And that is helpful for us because once the nursery have completed this nursery evaluation form, we will evaluate the form and provide recommendations to improve practices. Besides that, we conduct a nursery visit. So we go to the nursery, we walk through the different steps and procedures that are taking place, and we make recommendations into how different practices can be improved. An important component when we do our nursery audit or nursery visit is to demonstrate plant testing. We currently do plant testing based on leachate baiting. Leachate baiting consists in having blocks of plants, maximum of 40 plants at a time. You irrigate them with a known volume of water, depending on the container size. You collect this water and also deploy pairs in the water to bait for Phytophthora. Then we take these pairs to the laboratory and we process them to identify or evaluate if we detect any Phytophthora from them. The nurseries that follow the AIR program-based management practices receive an accreditation that lasts for 2 years. So what are the steps for joining the program? The first step is visit our website, our nursery at ucdavis.edu, and then fill out our contact form. We will send you the nursery evaluation form for you to complete. In the website, We have also resources into how to complete the nursery evaluation form. Last year, we had a presentation and a workshop where we addressed that, and we have a recorded version that new nurseries can take a look at. And then once you have completed the nursery evaluation form, we will review the form and we'll touch bases maybe by Zoom or by phone, flagging some areas that would like some clarification. And that is what we will bring once we do the nursery audit. So once we do the nursery audit, we will discuss observations, as I mentioned earlier. We'll provide recommendations for improved practices, and we will conduct a demonstration of the leachate testing. So once we have conducted the nursery visit and once we have done the plant testing, we will provide a rating for the nursery, and also we will do the steps to address to make sure you become AIR accredited. Our program is not based on failing nurseries. Our program is working together with nurseries to make sure nobody fails and they complete the best management practices we recommend to become accredited. And yes, and as I mentioned, accreditation lasts for 2 years. So something new that we have in our program is a certificate. We created this certificate based on the need of some nurseries that we learned there were certain agencies as the Army Corps of Engineers or Caltrans were requiring for bidding purposes of different projects that the nurseries should be part of the program. And so for the nurseries to have a proof to show that they're part of a program, we created this certificate, and nurseries that are certified have this certification that they can show when sometimes it's requested for any of the bidding processes. For more resources, I put it in this website, in this slide, the website of the nursery. I also have the website of the CalPhytos or Soil Dead, also Phytosphere, which is a consultant agency run by Ted Swicky that he started earlier in the years of 2014, working with these like restoration projects and with the native nursery industry at elucidating what is causing this decay. And also we have the last resource is a link from Dominican University. Dominican University in San Rafael, they have research center for nurseries, and this is based in San Rafael since Phytophthora morum was like one of the epicenters for Phytophthora morum was the Bay Area. So actually, I was there in San Rafael on Tuesday that there was a field day where nursery practitioners attended to hear some of the talks of the scientists there at San Rafael at Dominican University and from us at UC Davis, and we did some demonstration of like different plant testing and such. And something important that the Dominican University have is that they have a service called Steam on the Go. We understand having a steamer can be expensive and not all nurseries have it. And so what they do is that they have a steamer that they can bring to the nurseries. And so nurseries hire them to steam, like soilless media or pots when they're needed before they can or before they're able to build a steamer in their house, well, in the nursery. And so with that, I would like to acknowledge all the members of the team, and then also to all the funding sources that have made this program possible. Again, the QR code has our website where we have a ton of information and resources for nurseries that we are currently updating for everyone to have resources available. And with that, I will be happy to take any questions, and also my contact information is there.
Great.
Yeah, that was a mountain of excellent information for us. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And so is my understanding is the AIR program, the accreditation program, is at no charge.
Yes, program has no charge at all. Yeah.
Wow, that's very,
Impressive.
very
So
impressive.
yeah, so we have been
Generous.
able to have funding, well, mainly thanks to the Forest Service. We had additional funding from the California Native Plant Society 1 year provided funding for us. And we have from the San Francisco Public Utility Commission and the Santa Clara Valley Water District. I'm expecting to see how Forest Service funds will be affected in the coming years. But yeah, this is what we have for now.
We were very pleased to see a number of the nurseries that we have been purchasing plants from for restorations to be on your list. So it's
Great.
definitely,
Yeah.
A relief.
yeah, yeah. Because certainly a big concern. It's been shocking going out and seeing, especially the loss of tan oaks and live oaks, and it's just really worrisome. So,
Yeah, definitely. And the challenge with that is that the oaks are pretty susceptible to many phytophthora. And so the ideal solution is that those ones are not propagated by seedlings or transplants, but by seed. But we understand that can be challenging and that may take a long time. But those oaks, the oaks are in general pretty susceptible to Phytophthora species. Yeah.
Right. Well, we do have a couple of questions.
Sure.
And actually, I had a question about you'd mentioned if you're introducing a plant that you would want to keep it in quarantine, how long might that be?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have to say it depends on many things. So one depends on the turnaround of the nursery. I know there are nurseries where things stay for a pretty long time, like say like from 2 to 4 weeks, so like the quarantine time would be pretty short. What I would say if is that if the turnaround of the nursery production is pretty quick, what I would recommend is testing the plants that come to the nursery before mixing them up with the plant material that you may have. And by I mean in quarantine, you want to be in at least 3 feet away from the places where you're growing your nursery stock. And so coming back to the question, the how long really depends on the turnaround of the nursery, on how long the plant will be there.
Okay,
right.
thank you. And then we have a question from Susan asking a couple questions. If they can't steam their pots, can they dip the pots into diluted bleach to disinfect them?
Yeah, so we know there are some nurseries that cannot apply a steamer, which is the practice we recommend, but bleaching is definitely another practice that is recommended. In the air program, we have some guidelines for sanitizing based on disinfectants, and so you want to make sure if you're using bleach, you have a rate of 5,000 part per million. For disinfecting the pots.
Okay.
And then we've used in another program for birds that we work on a product called Effersan, which is like bleach, but not. It doesn't.
Deteriorate material. It
Right.
does not. It's more friendly to like clothing or if you splash it.
Oh, I see. I see.
All right.
Anyway, it's used. We use it as a disinfectant. So,
Mm-mm-mm.
but you haven't heard of Effersan being used.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, we'll
Research.
we'll research that. Another question was, is there let's see, Susan again said someone mentioned to her that a university lab researching Phytophthora discovered a microbe that kills or eats it. I don't remember the university or the microbe. Do you know of any promising research on curing a Phytophthora contamination in soil?
So there are certain microorganisms that have some antagonistic activity not only against Phytophthora but in other plant pathogens. Like for instance, an example of it is Trichoderma. And Trichoderma is a fungus, and there's a commercial product called Root Shield that in some cases it proves effective to combat not only Phytophthora but other pathogens. But some of the things with biological controls is that their efficacy is pretty variable depending on many environmental conditions, many conditions of the batch of the strain that the biological product is used, and then like how effective it is at let's say at yeah, like at combating or let's say killing the or depleting the, in this case, the Phytophthora. So yes, definitely there are some work done at looking at the effect of microbes, but they're not always effective, and so like their effectiveness is pretty variable.
Okay.
Right, right. Um, Susan also asked, is there a way to find out which nurseries have a Phytophthora outbreak? So we
So
can avoid.
yeah, so I would say that's hard. So we work directly with nurseries and nurseries that are willing to collaborate with us. Many cases do it under a confidential agreement. And so we cannot really, because that would be us being
Yeah,
against the nursery industry, and our job is working together with them. So
yeah.
definitely we just want to put them in the kind of wall of shame, same from which nurseries Phytophthora was detected.
Okay, yeah, another organization needs to do that.
Yeah, but no, not us. I would say my lab would do that.
Yeah, no, we've heard stories is the only thing of people buying plants and then discovered not good once they put it
Yeah,
out into the
yeah.
wild. So yeah. Well, let's see. There's a question in the Q&A. How much more expensive is it? Bob Hall asked to follow good practices versus poor practices.
That's a great question, and something that we are currently working with the program with the nurseries that are completely accredited is what is the cost of becoming air compliant. So this year we sent a survey to the 10 nurseries that are accredited. I will waiting on response of two of them, and once we have that information, we'll be able to tell, like this is exactly the price that it will take to become air compliant. And there are different levels, for instance, like the San Francisco Public Utility Commission has a state-of-the-art nursery in Sunol, but of course their budget was much higher, that more like a small scale native nurseries that also they have a shift implementing the best management practices to following our air practices.
Yeah, I know that in getting bid work for the nursery, the shade structures that we're planning over at Alamany Farms, a lot of the expense was in the grading and the gravel,
Definitely,
which
yeah.
of course they've got to get that gravel from some other resource too, so you're using that resource. But anyway, so there's, it's like, ouch, that's very expensive to bring in the gravel and grade it out like that. So, and then plus we're having to put fencing up to so that we can, have a contained area to work in. So, all of that, those expenses are, real for sure. We're
Yeah.
finding out.
Mhm.
But, once you've done it, well, then, if you can keep the Phytophthora and other pathogens out, well, it'll be worth it because the last thing we want to do is have, be giving plants out that end up spreading pathogens.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I think that's all the questions. Wait a
Maybe
minute.
one.
Okay. Jacob's asking, does the pathogen end up inside the plant roots, cell walls, branches, seeds, flowers, etc., or is it mostly attacking the leaves and external parts of the plant?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I would say The main concern at the nurseries and like the main creation of these best management practices were based on soil-borne phytophthora. So soil-borne phytophthora, an example of these include Phytophthora nicotiana, cinnamomi, cactorum. They infect the roots. So they only infect the roots of the plants. And then once you see symptoms, as for instance, like a wilted plant or a plant with defoliation or like with brown leaves, those are consequences of the root rot. So think if the roots are rotten, the plant cannot uptake water and nutrients, and that's why you start seeing symptoms in the foliage. But for us pathologists, when want to look for pathogens in these plants that may look that is something in the leaves, we want to look at the roots. And then if we see that the roots look discolored, like brown, that they're soft, that they may have a smell, that's when we need to think they have solvent Phytophthora that infects only the roots. It doesn't go up the plant. There are other Phytophthora, for instance, like this Phytophthora morum that causes sudden oak death. We call this an aerial Phytophthora. This Phytophthora can infect the leaves, and so that's why in the sudden oak death you see classic like leaf infection in the margin of the leaves, and so this one can actually infect the leaves of the plant.
Okay, so it depends on what type of what species of Phytophthora it is. And
Yes.
wow. Well, let's wishing all of us to be Phytophthora free. And thank you so much, Joanna, for your sharing your wisdom and your research with us. And like I was saying, couldn't be come at a better time for our chapter as we grow into a new nursery here.
Great, great. Yeah, so feel free to reach out to me if you want to have like a Zoom meeting to provide some advice to early stages of the nursery. Perhaps also we can schedule like a visit to nurseries that are part of the AIR program so you guys can see the practices that are taking place in there.
Fantastic.
Great. Fantastic. Yeah. Well, thanks again. And everybody out there in Zoom land, we're going to be in person at our next couple meetings, and we hope that you can join us there for Darren Peck in November and June Bondo at the
December.
in December. And whenever you're in San Francisco, give us a note, and we'll try and get together.
Sure thing. Yeah, sure thing. I would love to. Yeah. Have a good one, guys.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.